So how then, when we think about, we're talking about diet affecting, our mental health. Obviously, there's this, the gut-brain axis and things like leaky gut and leaky brain. So,
Mm.
uh, in
One
a
of my
short
favorite
space,
subjects. I'm
great.
just smiling. Yeah, so um, yeah, I'm going to be doing a talk on this fairly soon, so next month at the Public Health Collaborative, a meeting that's going to be happening in
Brilliant.
Scotland. I'm quite excited to be there and share this. Um, but yeah, it's just amazing when you start to pare everything back to the fundamental basics. And what you discover is that the lining of our gut is actually remarkably similar to the lining of our blood-brain barrier. So in the gut, you have epithelial cells, and then there's slightly different cells in the blood-brain barrier. They're endothelial cells. But when you look at the actual cell structure, you have a cell and a tight junction and another cell. And the tight junctions are these gaps or passageways between each cell that should be tightly monitored and tightly controlled. But we know what happens when you have leaky gut is that um, these passageways, the tight junctions, become more permeable and let substances through from the intestinal tract into they allow substances to cross over the intestinal wall and enter the systemic circulation, so enter our bloodstream. And we know that that is a net negative because there are studies quite clearly showing that once you have certain endotoxins or bacterial products crossing from the gut into the systemic circulation, it sets off an immune response and an immune reaction. So you have the release of inflammatory cytokines, which are just immune signaling molecules, immune mediators. And we know that we can measure these in people, and we know in mental disorders that people often have higher levels of these inflammatory markers. And it sets off a whole chain of reaction of inflammation, and oxidative stress comes into it as well, but immune signaling that then ends up causing leakiness of the blood-brain barrier. So you have the same tight junctions in your blood-brain barrier that are supposed to function to keep more toxic substances out of the brain, but also to allow nutrients to cross and some metabolites from the gut bacteria to cross to nourish the brain and to keep everything going and functioning as it should. But when you end up with a leaky blood-brain barrier, then it's anyone's best guess as to what actually ends up crossing over into the brain. And I'm a huge fan of Dr. Paul Mason and his work. And I know he's based in Australia, and there was a lecture I was watching from him recently, and he may have given it a few years ago, but he was talking about lectins and Parkinson's disease. And it blew my mind when I was listening to him because I hadn't been aware that there was research published showing that lectins can cross over the gut barrier and end up traveling to the brain and going into the brain and causing dysfunction there.